And with that, I am going to move on to our next guest who waited so patiently. Britta, thank you so much. I want to welcome Britta from the I never CRWD. I never get the acronym right there. The Capitol Region Watershed District, here to talk to us a little bit about the most recent Como Lake water quality report. So Britta, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All righty. Thank you everyone for having me tonight. I'm very, very thrilled to be here and be a part of your meeting. This came up, last time I was at a D10 meeting was last fall, and this presentation was specifically requested. So I'm glad we finally were able to make it happen. So I'm going to do a screen share here. Great. All right. Well, let me formally introduce myself here now that I'm loaded. Again, my name is Britta Belden, and I'm with the Capitol Region Watershed District. Been with the district for 15 years now, and the last 10 years I've been focusing on Como Lake. So a lot of the work you've been seeing going on at the lake has passed through my desk. So I'm thrilled to be here tonight to present on the current state of the lake. So I'm going to try to keep this brief because I know you have a full agenda, but certainly follow up with questions if you have any with me directly. And then also our website has a ton of information on it that can hopefully fill in the gaps of your questions. So I'll also mention this is focused on 2024 data because we're still actively collecting our 2025 data, and we analyze over the winter. So, all right. So how is Como Lake doing? That is the question, the never-ending question that everyone always has. So the good news is it's doing pretty good, all things considered. So I'm going to walk through what does pretty good mean? So we measure pretty good by measure of phosphorus concentration. So that's a nutrient of the primary nutrient of concern, algae growth, water clarity, the lake's biological health, specifically aquatic plants and the fish community. And then also in looking at a series of other pollutants found in the lake. So how do we measure these, or how are these measures measured? So there is extensive annual monitoring that occurs on Como Lake, and that's been happening since 1984. So Ramsey County Public Works has been leading that effort since 1984, and then has been supported by Ramsey County SWCD, the DNR, and then CRWD. So through all those efforts, we routinely monitor water quality, water level, the aquatic plant community, fisheries, bacteria, and a whole suite of other things. You can see this picture below. You've maybe noticed the three buoys out in the yellow buoys out in the lake, and we're continuously measuring water quality out there. We're looking at fish. And then the picture on the right is chloride sampling in the winter through the ice. So historically, water quality in Como Lake has been very poor. This picture is from the late 90s. And it was in 1998 that water quality had reached a critical threshold. And it was actually the basis of the formation of Capitol Region Watershed District. Was a group of citizens petitioned to the state to form our district to help the lake. So why has water quality in Como Lake been so poor? So Como Lake has a really big watershed relative to the lake size. So pollutants are carried into the lake through stormwater runoff, and then they flow in through 22 major storm sewer outfalls that drain directly to the lake. Como Lake is listed as impaired for nutrients, so specifically phosphorus, chloride, and that's from road salt, and mercury from atmospheric deposition. But there's a whole other suite of pollutants that flow into the lake that impact and cause stress on the system. So sediment or dirt, sand, and that actually acts as a vector and carries other pollutants in as well, and then buries the lake bottom. Trash, metals, bacteria, and then other emerging contaminants like PFAS. But excess phosphorus is the primary driver of poor water quality in Como Lake and is one of the primary reasons you see all this green stuff in the lake in the summer. So additional pressures on Como Lake are aquatic invasive species. So the lake is listed or has two invasives that are listed. So curly leaf pondweed and then common carp. Both of these pictures are taken from the lake or at the lake. And then last year in 2024, we worked with the DNR to identify two new invasives in the lake. So hybrid water milfoil and then Chinese mystery snail, both of which have impacts on the aquatic ecosystem. There's been a significant amount of management that's occurred in Como Lake to address water quality issues and improve the ecosystem. So the district focuses, we work collaboratively and in partnership with the city of St. Paul, the county, DNR. It's really a team effort. And then also the community, District 10 and the surrounding neighborhoods and residents have been critical in helping with lake improvement efforts. But we really, from a management perspective, we focus on in-lake projects, so things that are being done actually inside the lake, and then the watershed work, which is in the surrounding area. So for in-lake, we've done an alum treatment to address phosphorus in 2020, curly leaf pondweed control, carp removal, native aquatic plant reestablishment, lakeshore restoration maintenance, and then ongoing monitoring. And then in the watershed, there are a number of large-scale underground infiltration projects that capture runoff before it reaches a lake. There's also above-ground projects like rain gardens. Those are probably the most commonly recognized. And then there's non-structural practices that are completed by you all. So leaf cleanups and adopted drain, which are all critically important for reducing pollutants flowing into the lake. So phosphorus reduction is a primary management goal for Como Lake. The Minnesota Shallow Lake Standard for phosphorus is 60 micrograms per liter, and I'll kind of walk you through what that looks like. Historically, phosphorus concentrations in the lake from 1984 to 2019, and this is pre-alum treatment, were an annual average of 173 micrograms per liter. So that's about 3 times that state standard. In 2023, I'm very happy to report that phosphorus concentrations after a number of projects, our annual average was 55.6 micrograms per liter. So this is the first time in history that Como Lake met state standards, which was a huge accomplishment and just really exciting to see. So we were absolutely thrilled about that. And then in 2024, we had a bit of a departure from our state standard or meeting the state standard. We increased a bit to 89.2 micrograms per liter for the annual average concentration. So what does that look like in the grand scale of concentrations? And lake water quality. So this graph is showing all phosphorus concentrations, annual average phosphorus concentrations in the lake since 1984. The blue line represents concentrations measured at the lake bottom, in the bottom waters, which has a different dynamic than the surface water. The red line is the surface water, and that really is what the standard is based on, is the surface waters. And then the green dotted line at the bottom is our state standard at 60 micrograms per liter. So you can see historically, there are really, really high concentrations well above the state standard. And then in 2020, we completed our alum treatment, which is really specific to targeting phosphorus. And we see a massive drop in our phosphorus concentrations in both the surface and bottom waters. And then since 2020, over the last 5 years, we've had a few fluctuations in the lake as far as phosphorus concentrations, bringing us up to 2024. So in addition, in 2024, we saw a decline in water clarity. So the water clarity is really a measure of how far can you see down into the water. And we use a tool called a Secchi disc to measure this. So you see in this picture on the bottom left, that's a Secchi disc. It's a black and white disc that you drop down through the water and then drop it down till you can't see it anymore. And then the depth in which you drop it to and you can't see it, you measure it, and that's your depth. So the graph on the right, if you imagine that the top of the top axis with the dates, that's the surface water, and then the bar going down is the depth measurement. And the graph itself is the lake water. You can see that water clarity really declined in 2024 throughout, especially in the summer months, with this box around June, end of June through beginning of October. All the water clarity and the Secchi depth measurements really declined and were below the state's Secchi standard of 1 meter. So that's about 3 feet. So you could only see down, 3 feet or less during those summer months, which tracks with historical data. But water was a little murky through those months, and I'll get into why that happened next. All right, so why the decline in 2024? So if anybody remembers, we had rain, and more rain. So the spring of 2024 was the 4th wettest June on record. So we had 7.8 inches of rain in total in June alone. It rained 70% of the days from May through July. And this results in very high watershed loading, meaning there's a lot coming off the landscape that's flushing into the lake. So if you imagine in the spring, we have silver maple seeds, we have yard debris, we have all sorts of stuff that is all just getting flushed into the lake continuously. This is also on the heels in 2023. It was a drought year. And so there really was minimal watershed loading that occurred during that time. And that was the year that we met the state standard for the first time. So this also resulted in very low water clarity. And I want to just tell you what this picture is. If you've ever noticed the green box on the Como, or on the corner and the southwest corner of the lake, at the intersection there, this is us, our staff, taking a sample directly from the storm sewer. And those samples look on the bottom that are really brown. That's what the water looks like that's going into the lake from the watershed. So everything flushing in is highly contaminated and carrying quite a bit with. So I'll also mention that the growing season precipitation matters, so that the growing season is technically May to September. So growing season versus calendar year is a little bit different. So our calendar year in 2023, we had 31.91 inches of precip. And then that increased in 2024 to 32.12 inches. And then by comparison, the growing season in 2023, we only had 16.47. And then for 2024, so 22.64. So again, this is just a lot of flushing of the watershed into the lake. So our samples showed from we call that station in the southwest corner of the lake, our Como 3 monitoring station. Our samples, through our sampling, we are able to determine the amount of phosphorus that flowed into the lake from that subwatershed. So in 2023, during the growing season, we measured 39 pounds of TP, or total phosphorus, flowing into the lake from that station. And then in 2024, we saw 75 pounds of phosphorus flowing into the lake because of all that increased precip. So that's 125% increase in the volume of water, and then also a massive increase in the phosphorus. This also just illustrates how critically important it is to do those leaf cleanups and keep all the nutrients out of the storm sewer system and therefore out of the lake. Let's see. Whoop. Okay, sorry, I got a little mixed up there. So Como Lake is influenced by internal dynamics, and those are natural, but then also many external factors, including climate extremes. And we definitely saw that with our drought 2023, and then the very wet 2024. So it's important to remember that Como Lake is a living, breathing system, and it has many complexities, and there really is no silver bullet to fixing the lake, and that all of our management needs to be adaptive, meaning we need to make decisions that work with the lake and the existing conditions and work with it instead of at it. And in order to do that, monitoring and understanding the data is a really critical piece for making those science-based management decisions. And then also with Como Lake, progress is incremental, but it's cumulative. So every little bit helps. And that's really our goal with the lake, is to work with the system, take this holistic approach. And over time, the result will incrementally get us to a healthy, improved lake system. So CRWD is committed to improving Como Lake, and we have a lot of current and ongoing projects that are working towards our management goals. So one of our biggest areas of work right now is aquatic plant management. Aquatic plants are critically important to the lake because native plants serve as a phosphorus sink, and they hold phosphorus in their plant matter throughout the summer during these really warm days and with a lot of light that drive productivity and algal growth. So having plants thriving in the lake is very important. And part of that is getting rid of the invasives or controlling them to a manageable level so those native plants can thrive and not be choked out by the invasives. So this past spring, we did an herbicide treatment to try to control curly leaf pondweed, and that's been working really well. You might see a lot of curly leaf out at the lake right now. But if you look closely, a lot of it is browned and dying off. And that's what we want to see. The biggest thing is those plants weren't able to mature and produce the plant buds called turions that then further their spread. We're also working with the DNR and the county on the newly identified hybrid water milfoil in the lake. And actually next Tuesday, we're going to be out there with both DNR and the county hand pulling it. It can spread very quickly and take over a lake. It can spread through plant fragments and parts. So we're going to very delicately remove it from the lake because it's at a very low infestation level right now and can be managed through hand pulling. So trying to get ahead of that spreading throughout the lake. We're also supporting the native aquatic plant community by doing transplanting and seeding. These pictures on the right are CRWD staff doing some seeding of native plants in the nearshore zone. And these also serve to stabilize the shoreline areas. A huge focus has been lakeshore improvements. We've been working with the city of St. Paul on that work. So vegetation management, and then also invasive species control, working on outfall, the erosion control. And then also the city did the major outfall replacement last fall. I'm sure everyone noticed it was hard to miss, but that was critical for some of the erosion control happening around the lake. A lot of that infrastructure was 100 years old and was causing a lot of erosion, which can drive phosphorus loading and then also sedimentation to the lake. We're also going to be looking into installing some stable shore fishing areas along the lake to work toward erosion control. And then I'm seeing a typo here, but we have new signage that's going to be going in hopefully this fall that you will all get to enjoy. We've been also shifting our focus to fisheries management, so continued carp removal, and then also a fun term called biomanipulation, which really means managing the fishery to be in balance by having more predator fish. We have a huge bluegill population in the lake, and when you have an imbalance in the fish community, it can cause other cascading effects. And then also the district's biggest area is continued watershed management of both structural projects, some of those big underground systems, and then the non-structural supporting you all and leaf cleanups and adopt a drain and other efforts. One of the biggest structural projects that you will likely hear about more and more in the coming months is the McMurray Field project, and that is going to be capturing a huge area of land that flows into through that Como 3 pipe into the lake and having massive reductions in phosphorus to the lake. That's a huge area that produces high loads of phosphorus. So, all right. Hopefully I caught, or you all caught that all. I know that was brief, but if you have any questions, be happy to take them. And again, can take questions via email or afterwards. So
Yeah, I think we've got some time for questions. So folks, if you've got them, we've got Britta here right now. So just if you are in the streetcar station, speak up, or if you're online, you can raise your hand. Britta, do you want to unshare or stop the share? And then we should be able to see folks
Sure.
who might raise their hands here. Here we go.
Yeah, Britta, I have a question for you. Can you say some more about what that McMurray Field project is and how it'll reduce phosphorus?
Sure. It's still as a project start date. I think, well, it hasn't been set, but 2026 will be likely. There's still effort to secure funding to have that be installed. But essentially it'll be a large underground system that underneath the fields, not the soccer fields, but the large grassy area to the north of the ball fields, the baseball fields, that will capture, it'll kind of intercept a mainline storm sewer underneath there, and all this runoff and storm water will flow into this system, preventing it from otherwise going to the lake. The specifics of the design and other just the project I can't speak to, but and I think there is still some design elements being developed, so more information will be forthcoming.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can I ask about the alum treatment? I remember when that got done in 2020, and my understanding is that it's not like it magically like makes phosphorus cease to exist, but it pulls it out of the water column and like sequesters it down in the sediments. Is there any plan to do that again? Are there limitations on how frequently you can do that? I'm curious about that as a tool in the toolbox.
Yes, great question. So yes, the alum treatment, it's aluminum sulfate, which aluminum sulfate is a common, alum, we use it for pickling as a common compound. So alum binds with phosphorus, that creates a chemical bind. So yeah, when you apply it, it strips the water column of bioavailable phosphorus out. But the main mechanism that it works is it creates this blanket of alum over the lake bottom that then binds with phosphorus that's coming out of the bottom sediments. And phosphorus coming from the bottom sediments, that's what we call internal phosphorus loading. So that's the main mechanism in which bioavailable phosphorus goes into the water and then algae eats it. So it's essentially, yeah, sequestering and preventing that phosphorus from coming up and being available. So we've been tracking, we did our first dose in 2020, and we've been monitoring it to ensure it's working. The main thing with alum treatments is the longevity is kind of variable. It really depends on the lake, and how much, well, the watershed loading is happening, all these different factors that may make it be used up quicker or not. So we've been tracking that, and all those buoys with the monitoring equipment attached to them have been critical for that. We've also taken sediment cores of the lake so that we're making sure we're understanding, when it's used up, because the next management tool in the toolbox would be to do a maintenance treatment to kind of boost and refresh that. But I'm happy to say that our monitoring data shows that it's working really, really well. that the main reason we're having continued, well, and that's why we're seeing the sub 100 annual phosphorus concentrations. And then the main reason we're seeing some of these higher peaks that post alum treatment is really the watershed loading and related to some of these intense precipitation events or back-to-back precipitation events. So
Thank you. Other questions that are out there for Britta?
So it sounds like there isn't any effective and non-cost prohibitive way to filter the phosphorus before it even gets to the lake.
So I'm sorry, I didn't hear all that, but are you saying there's not a cost effective?
I'm wondering if is there not a way to filter the phosphorus before it even hits the lake?
Well, that's a great question. And actually that's a large part of what we do as a district is the watershed work. So those large underground facilities, though, that is what's capturing and filtering phosphorus before it gets to the lake. So that's one way. So if you can imagine, so for example, under at Arlington and Hamlin, there's a big field right to the northwest of the zoo. Underneath that field is a huge underground chamber that captures the entire Como neighborhood of runoff. So we have, and then infiltrates it to the ground. So it captures 50 acres in total, and it is 275 feet in length and 3 10-foot perforated pipes. So that's one way to kind of get all the neighborhood runoff and capture before it goes to lake. And the McMurray Field project would be similar. And there's a number of these practices all around the lake. So there's one under the golf course. There's one under the Como High School ball fields. One thing we have looked into, and this is kind of a developing science, is doing treatment right next to the lake. You can do like an alum treatment, almost like a wastewater treatment type facility where it's capturing runoff. But there are a number of constraints with something like that in a public park, where there's walking paths and all that. So we've looked at every option possible. And I think, like I said, there's no silver bullet to this. It's that incremental approach and trying all sorts of things and taking the opportunities as they come. I think one other challenge with Como Lake is the watershed is fully developed and we have to wait till opportunities come up. So anytime construction happens of an acre or more, we're able to implement stormwater capture practices, or if there's, a street reconstruction project, that's a time we can piggyback with the city and get rain gardens put in the boulevards, etc. So
thank you. James has got his hand up.
My question is more of sort of a holistic. So how how safe is the water? We know don't drink it, but or ingest it. But what about skin contact and say canoeing in the lake or paddleboarding in the lake? Kids running into the water, splashing, and then running out again off Duck Point. Those kinds of things. Is the water safe for that, despite the rising poor quality?
Well, it's kind of a the water is safe, yes, and with some caveats, of course. I think the one thing, so it's I'm trying to think of a way to craft this in a plain language way, but essentially, if can be cyanobacteria blooms, and that is something that can make people sick. So if the water looks, it's a class 2B water, which means it's not a swimming lake either. So it's not regulated for, it's not like a beach where they will close the city or the county will close the lake for human contact with the water because of a bacteria issue or a cyanobacteria issue. Some cyanotoxins or anything like that. So I would say, I mean, in general, or cyanobacteria would probably be the major or main thing that would make the water not safe. And when that does happen, we are tracking that, and there would be notifications around the lake if there is a cyanobacteria bloom. So, so also if the water looks a cyanobacteria bloom, they're very complicated and hard to track. But if the algae looks really questionable, I think I would use your best judgment to not have your pet or your child touch the water. But I mean, ingestion would maybe be, that's the biggest risk to dogs or humans, would just be actual ingestion. And so most activities on Como Lake wouldn't put a paddleboarder or anyone at risk of ingesting the water. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's kind of a maybe not the surface response, but I would just say use your best judgment, and we work with the county to make sure if there were a cyanobacteria bloom that people would be notified. So, and luckily that's rarely happened in the lake. So I'm also
Britta,
happy to say that bacteria we've been tracking, there's very low bacteria in the lake, especially since the lakeshore improvements in the early 2000s, because there aren't geese in the lake anymore. So
Britta,
Oh, go ahead.
can you guys hear me okay? Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay. All right. So I walk around the lake probably 4 to 5 times a week. And after the gallon treatment, I mean, thanks for doing that. We had best water quality for 2 or 3 years that I've ever seen in my nearly 40 years of living in the neighborhood. There's a ton of, in my opinion, this is my non-scientific anecdotal view of walking around today. There seems like a ton of weeds. I'm assuming they're curly leaf pond weed. They looked very green to me, not brown like you had mentioned. And I know that you did you get them this year, and I guess you're going to track that. But I also looked online and it showed curly leaf pondweed everywhere. So it just seems like there's a lot of it. So just FYI, I'm passing that along. But also, it does seem like we're seeing some cyanobacteria, mostly along the shorelines in certain quiet areas. So that's probably a thing for. I would suggest staying out of the water, keep, because if you see that kind of floating sort of looks almost like oily sort of thing, you probably want to steer clear of that. Because that's the stuff that makes dogs and probably people too sick. So anyway, it's more of a comment, but kind of the question is, I'm just surprised that since the curly leaf was treated this year, why it seems like there's a lot of weeds this year, like significantly more than last year.
Well, I will say that so yes, there's curly leaf growing. The biggest thing we are trying to prevent is that production of the turions. And so the plants have to be allowed to mature to a certain point where they produce these turions. And the treatment should be preventing that. Even though there might be a lot, most of them aren't producing the turions because they've been stunted in their growth. And then because of their growth cycle, it is normal that the curly leaf is the thickest this time of the year. And this is also what makes it so problematic is because it all dies off the end of June naturally, which then it decomposes in the water and sends this huge pulse of phosphorus into the lake right during the hottest summer months and longest light days with light. So then it's kind of a perfect storm for algal growth. I will say a lot of the curly leaf right now is kind of entangled in filamentous algae, like that really kind of goopy stuff. And that grows on the bottom of the lake over the winter, and then it surfaces after ice out. So it's kind of then gets tangled up in the curly leaf. So that's probably more of what you're seeing right now is the filamentous, which is not toxic. So, and then I'll also just add that cyanobacteria can exist in the lake, and that is in the lake throughout the year, but whether it's toxic or not is a little more complicated. It's very episodic and temporal, so it can have a burst of toxicity, but then go away within a couple hours. So it's really hard to sample. So what we're looking for when we're looking for toxic conditions are kind of surrogate parameters, and looking to see if conditions are aligning to make the cyanobacteria able to become toxic. So that it's fairly rare that those conditions actually align in the lake. So if that's at all comforting to you, and probably what you're seeing out there is filamentous. So.
Well, Britta, thank you so much. I'm going to wrap us up here, mostly because I can see our next topic from the Environment Committee is Como Lake cleanup, which seems
Yes.
like the perfect segue there. So I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us tonight. Like, clearly this is a topic that people feel really, we love our lake, right? Like, everybody loves the lake and everybody sees it and has feelings and questions. And so I would love if we could bring you back in, once or twice a year to talk to us about kind of the status of the lake and let people feel familiar with it on a scientific level, not just a viewing level.
Yeah, great. I'd love to come back, and thank you all so much for your time, and certainly send me questions if you have any. So appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Britta.
All right. Thank you.